Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Rudy Page. Tonight, we've got the Windrush Dialogues in collaboration with EALING Libraries, as usual. And we're looking forward to a great dialogue with lots of different perspectives and some interesting dialogues with our guests. So thank you. And this evening, we've got Karen Henry with us from EALING Libraries. Karen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's a hot day, bright day, so trying to get the most to it, but very busy as usual.
Great, great. So this is in fact is our third series. Can you believe it?
I can believe it. It's been hard going, but very enjoyable journey. So hope it continues.
It has been indeed. So this evening we're going to be reminiscing, and it's very much about the children of the Windrush generation. And we're going to be thinking about their lives and their perspectives and their dreams as well, in terms of their progression and what they have done over the years. So, but first of all, I'm going to ask Dr. Beverly Lindsay to actually give us some context of the Windrush generation. Thank you very much. Over to you, Beverly.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, Beverly.
Good evening. Windrush generation. History so often recounts the stories of winners and losers, but seldom talk about those who are nation builders. The Windrush generation story is a story of nation builders, the story of a people that have faced institutional racism, discrimination, in order to rise above and bring to this country the values of a shared sense of humanity, equality, and respect for all cultures. Yesterday, the 22nd of June, marked the 73rd anniversary of the arrival of the Empire Windrush at Tilbury Docks, carrying 555 West Indians who were looking to rewrite their fortunes in a response to a call from Britain, desperate for labor. In many cases, a whole family or a district would contribute for someone to make that journey. The first hand of a partner draw. The tailor or the dressmaker in the district would make the suit or the dress for free with a promise. May we send for you when we settle. And those promises were often fulfilled. Many followed: spouses, partners, sweethearts, siblings, children, friends, and so on, not forgetting that tailor or the dressmaker. People left the Caribbean with big dreams and high hopes. As a matter of fact, when I was a child in Jamaica, I thought the street of England was paved with silver and gold. And when we arrived in Britain, we would be greeted by Her Majesty the Queen. Many may remember a poem that we often recited in school in Jamaica: "Pussycat, pussycat, where have you been? I've been to London to look at the Queen." You know, you may have observed the way that the early arrivals were dressed. They all had high expectations. My parents came here in the 1950s, and we as children joined them in the early 60s. I soon had a rude awakening when I arrived here, because when my mother pulled up at the car, and my mother was really forward. She was the first Black woman to drive a car in Birmingham, so she actually picked us up in her own car with a friend. And when she arrived and parked at this red brick building, and the smoke was coming out, I sat there comfortable, and everybody was getting out, and I wondered, where are they going? And they said, well, you're home. And that was, downhill from there on. So people from the Caribbean saw the UK as a mother country. And when they arrived there, many expected to be welcomed with open arms. This unfortunately was not the case. Many were greeted with cold indifference, not only the weather, racism, and hardship. Nothing prepared them for the hostile living conditions. Up to 4 people sharing a room, kitchen and bathroom space, in shift patterns, the cold weather, the paraffin heaters. Some of you might be too young to know the paraffin heaters, and the smell of the paraffin that would linger on your clothes forever. I could go on. However, Caribbean immigrants had a strong sense of identity and community spirit, and strong Christian values, which enabled them to overcome the difficulties they encountered to make a life here and build a legacy for most of us living here today. One of the most enduring legacy of Windrush generation are the Black majority churches. Founded during the 1950s and 60s, many were formed in people's bedrooms and the infamous front room that you weren't allowed to go in. The early immigrants were not welcomed in the traditional churches. The churches provide these in-house churches, in living room and bedroom churches, provided a place where Black people could meet, worship, fellowship, and have their culture and beliefs affirmed. They also share their stories, gain spiritual strength, learn and develop new skills in an informal setting, and then put those skills to good use in the wider world. Windrush is now so much a part of British history, and now is a shorthand used to describe the generation of Black Britons. As a matter of fact, I'm sure like many of you, I didn't know I was a Windrush generation until this so-called Windrush scandal, because we only used to celebrate Windrush Day when the ship arrived. We didn't know that we were a generation of Windrush. However, Windrush is not just a scandal. Windrush is more than the forgotten thoughts of leaders that had decided to set from their minds the sacrifices, adversaries, and spirit of transformation of a generation that was non-white and non-European deportment. Windrush is a spirit of adventure, the strength to rise to change, the embodiment of the commonwealth of people, regardless of their race, language, or gender. As such, Windrush should be seen and positively upheld as a term coined to describe the desire for nation building. Windrush is not just an historic period of time after witnessing the near destruction of UK and Europe. It is the Commonwealth seed that has brought forth politicians, educators, scientists, sports personalities, poets, doctors, nurses, pilots, etc. Collectively and sustainably demonstrating the benefit of intergenerational legacy that equips a nation to remain pertinent, competitive, and appealing. Inclusion, equal but different, rather than assimilation to be like us. It is what the spirit of Windrush should be, synonymous to that of success. There are many examples of the Windrush spirit and that of nation builders, and I could name a few. We have Lord Morris, Professor Palmer, most of you must have heard of him. For it has been said that when a lion learns to write, no longer will only the hunters tell the story. I read that again. When a lion learns to write, no longer will only the hunter's story be read. We have to salute all those individuals that have sacrificed to pave the way that we can be here this evening. So we say happy belated Windrush Day, and we'd like to encourage most of our young people to think outside the box and start looking at other careers. I've been assisting HDR UK, Data Research UK, in a Black internship program to encourage more Black people, young people, to take up data research and artificial intelligence. They have just started. They will launch the first cohort of people this June, and we're hoping that there will be another next year. So we want young people to start looking at other things, because we are moving, COVID has taught us that we have to think differently, moving into technology, artificial intelligence. So I wish you all a good evening. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that, Beverly. You've really set the context wonderfully for this session now that we are now going into as children of the Windrush generation. So we'll be looking back in time, 60s, 70s and 80s, and a great chance to reminisce about growing up in Ealing. And we're going to speak with Derek Clement, and he'll be talking, basically our theme is Memories from My Neighborhood, and features Derek, who's an international celebrity hairstylist, and will share his insight and his journey as he was growing up in Ealing. So good evening, Brother Derek.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Rudy. Thank you, everyone. Good evening, guys. It's really a privilege to be on this this platform this evening.
Thank
you. I couldn't help but, as Beverly talks about her experiences as a young girl coming into the UK, I wasn't as privileged as Beverly to get a car to pick me up at the airport. I have to confess, when I came into London as a young child, I was absolutely disappointed with what I saw.
Okay, and I'm sure we're going to hear a bit more about that. So thanks for that. And of course, as just to reinforce the timelines that Beverly spoke about, so the Windrush actually left Jamaica Kingston Harbour on the 27th of May 1948, arrived in the UK on the 22nd, Tilbury, and they were let out on the 23rd of June. So these 2 days, increasingly, the 22nd and 23rd, are starting to encompass the Windrush. So the Windrush reminiscence. So Karen, go to you first. Over to you, thank you.
You mean in answering questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. So, Derek, can I ask you? You know, what is your fondest memory of growing up in Ealing? When you were around sort of like 8 to 12, around that era.
Yeah, I mean, I have to confess, after having arrived and settled in, and of course I miss my brothers and I miss my friends. I had many brothers, from obviously, you know, Caribbean family sort of thing, many brothers. But so having settled into the country, here's an interesting thing. When I went to school, join the school in Acton County, it's interesting that I was a very good cricketer. I played cricket very well. And that held me in very good stead, because the school headmaster, Mr. Kibblewhite, he was really, I mean, he just couldn't believe such a young lad could play cricket so well. So I became immediately a teacher's pet. And as time progressed and I got into higher forms and higher years, I became the school cricket captain at a very early age. So I think those are very fond memories. So it gave me a sense of empowerment, if you like, as a young lad. Bear in mind, it was a very racist backdrop, but because I played cricket very well, I was everybody's pet, so to speak. And the entire school loved me at a very, very early age.
Okay, thanks for that, Derek. So who inspired you outside of your family between the ages when you were between the ages of 16 and 21? And also, on reflection, what lessons did you take from that period in your life when you reached your 30s?
You know, I never forget this gentleman's name. My mother's a single parent, single parent woman. She was never married, so basically she had to bring us up all by her own. So there was never a father figure, if you like. But it was not such a big thing because Caribbean parents, especially mothers, are to be endowed with all the elements to bring up a child by themselves. So if you have one good parent, that's good enough. And so my mother was both mother and father. She was brilliant. She was six foot tall, big woman, very intelligent. She was a nurse, obviously. So she was really capable to ensure that we were well brought up. Now, in those days, we had the Race Relations Board, and she made friends with one of the gentlemen who ran the Race Relations Board, a man called Jimmy Bazzi. He's from Antigua. And Jimmy Bazzi had the kind of look of a Malcolm X and the Marcus Garvey rolled into one. I think he went to Oxford. And so this man was determined to ensure that he supported the community. But being a single man, my mother ensured that he got a good meal after his hard day's work on Acton High Street. And so Jimmy Bazzi, to a large extent, was one of those black men, elder, that I looked up to. And he taught me an awful lot. And here's what he taught me at that early age, brothers. I remember I had some difficulties with at school. And I would ask him, I'd go to him for advice. And he was such a collegiate gentleman. I mean, he was brilliant. I learned a lot from him. So basically, yeah, I mean, he was one of those guys that really inspired me a great deal, and something I could look up to as a young black boy.
And when you reach into your 30s now, so you're well into manhood, what can you remember what particular lessons that you took from that time? Because obviously between 16 and 21, you're just maturing, you know.
Right, so two things that really left an indelible impression on me. Jimmy Bazzi, I remember trying to buy my first car. It was a Morris Minor. I think it was £40 was the car. And I went to the bank for a bank loan, and the bank wouldn't give it to me. It was Lloyd's Bank in Maida Vale. He would not give me the loan. And I really felt demoralized. I I couldn't believe the bank would not give me a loan. I was so excited to get this bloody car. And I went to, I said, Jimmy, the bank refused. I don't know why I asked him in the first place. I mean, the bank refused. But I just felt I needed to speak to somebody, an elder, like father figure. Yeah. And since I knew Jimmy had a kind of gravitas, a kind of eloquence about him, he said, Derek, let's go to the bank. And he walked me into the bank and he asked for the bank manager. I'd never forget this. And with his sort of very impeccable English, he said, "Can I speak to the bank manager?" The manager came up and he said, and they spoke their language. I was standing next to Jimmy, and they spoke their little, language together that they both understood. I didn't understand. I just wanted to get my £40. And the bank manager says, "Okay, fine, he's got the loan." I got the loan. And as I grew older, I remember I had some issues with a girlfriend, my girlfriend at the time, and obviously, as a young man, I needed somebody to tell me, show me the roadmap if you like to deal with girls. And I remember asking Jimmy Bazzi again. I said, Jimmy, my girlfriend, I'm having problems. What do I do? And I remember Jimmy Bazzi said, Derek, never mind, it's youthful expectations. And I tell you something, I didn't know what that meant. The way he framed that sentence, it's youthful expectations. That's a big word. That's a big sort of a big synopsis. And I remember I said from that day on, I said to myself, I need to learn how to frame words and put words together. Because at such an early age, youthful expectations, I never heard that term before to describe a relationship.
Absolutely.
So, of course, definitely.
Right. Thanks for that. Karen? Just unmute you.
Sorry, I'll say it again. Looking back, you're in your 50s and everything. Looking back, what do you feel were your top 3 accomplishments in life?
Yes, of course. The greatest thing is to buy a house. I mean, of course, it's referred to as as you know, the first time you purchase a house, you become a capitalist. And I remember buying my house. That was a big thing to me at such an early age of 24. And I think the next big thing, having bought the house, I bought the salon in Maida Vale, my salon, which is an enormous contribution to the Black community and to myself as a Black man. And I think, of course, later on, I mean, being being referred to as the best Black hairdresser in the UK. I think it was 1985, I was nominated to be Afro Hairdresser of the Year. Those three things meant a great deal to me. It still does to this very day.
Yes, and tell us the rest of the story about that award, Derek.
As I said, I mean, in those days, working for Splinters into the iconic Winston Isaac, the legendary Splinters International, we were doing such a marvelous job looking after Black women's hair that we kind of tweaked the whole idea about Afro hair. So where your average salon would have just basically backcombed and created this sort of bouffant hairstyle like those French women in Paris, Winston, having worked at Vidal Sassoon, knew and understood the concept of movement and direction and shape. And so we were able then in those days to take Afro hair, and of course you had to manipulate the Afro hair to get it straight in the first place. Because bear in mind, I mean, Black women had to conform to the landscape. I mean, they've relaxed their hair, and that's the beautiful thing with Black women. They're able then to morph into any given situation to survive. And so we had to straighten our hair. And Winston had this knack in terms of creating Black hair, making Black hair do the things that most salons couldn't have done. And so that was creating shape, balance, and movement. So you saw the sisters in those days asking you for incredible style. Somebody asked me to do a Lady Di. Other people wanted to be like Lulu. Others wanted to look like Anne Winter from the editor of Vogue. So we were able to do these wonderful things just with Afro hair because of Winston Isaacs.
All right, thanks for that. So at what age did you understand that working together within your community to overcome the challenges that you faced was the most effective way to make progress?
You know, it's interesting, brother, as people talk about Black Don't Unite, this is a lot of nonsense. As a young lad, I've never worked for anybody else but a Black company, a well-oiled, I may add, a Black company. And I mean, the collaboration, because of course, to work in a salon that size, everyone worked, it was actually teamwork. You had the shampoo boys and girls, you had the people who technicians that relaxed the hair, and that went on to the colorist if the person wanted the color, and then finally went on to the stylist. So this sense of collaboration, like if you think of a well-oiled conveyor belt in any enormous institutions, we had that exact situation. And we were able in those days, having said that, create young entrepreneurs. So we were all young people aspiring to become like Winston Isaacs, and then to ultimately become our own entrepreneurs. And each one of us did left Splinters and became business people. And I think today some of the greatest hairdressers came from Splinters. So yes, of course, I think I was definitely inspired to be the best I could be.
Yeah, so Splinters really was a machine, if you think about it, in terms of the way it operated. And many people talk about the Tuskegee machine. So yeah, excellent.
Absolutely.
So as a child of the Windrush generation, what do you think we should be celebrating in 2023 for the 75th anniversary?
You know, I do agree with Beverly about, I mean, I never knew much about the idea of Windrush, and a lot wasn't said about Windrush. But looking back now on our history, I think it's something that should be continued. We should continue to celebrate Windrush in such a big way. Bear in mind, Windrush, I think Her Majesty, is it MV Empire Windrush was formerly a German ship, wasn't it?
Something like that.
It was the Monte Rosa, I think it was called in those days. The ship was built in Germany and launched as a passenger ship.
Yeah.
And so our people are fighting the Germans for redemption, and if you like, for you know what I'm saying? And here at the end of the day, it's quite ironic that that same German ship that we may have used in the war was eventually used as that ship to bring our people in. And the term Windrush, I mean, that's a ubiquitous term. To me, when you say wind, what was it about this wind that brought our people into this country that would eventually settle here and create, as Beverly referred to, as the legacy, the generations upon generations? I think this is now the 4th and 5th generations. I think this is perhaps the most iconic event in our culture as Black Britons, that we should celebrate. So I think you're perfectly right. For 2023, I think there's no other phenomenon other than the Windrush.
Absolutely. And we certainly will then, of course, have the grandchildren and great-grandchildren on the platform by that time as well. I'm sure that we really will.
Indeed.
So thanks for that, Derek. So come back to you in a while. So we've also got Angela Clark with us this evening. Angela, good evening. And if you can unmute.
Rudy.
Hi, are you okay? So just give us some insight in terms of your growing up. I think you're a South Londoner. And who inspired you outside of your family when you were between the ages of 16 and 21? And then now on reflection, what lessons did you take from that period in your life when you reached into your 30s?
Well, I think certainly when I was, yes, I grew up, I was born in Balham, South London. So yes, I also studied in Ealing as well. Actually, when I did my counselling diploma, it was actually in Ealing that I did my studies. So, but who inspired me? I think I went to college. I went to Southwark College in Waterloo. And I think at that time, it was one of my tutors who really kind of inspired me, because when I left school, because of circumstances pretty much beyond my control, I was always told that I wouldn't really achieve much. And they didn't even think that I would go to college, but I pushed myself and went to college to study business management at that time, actually. When they had HNDs and whatever. So I went to college, and one of the tutors said to who was Black, and pretty much reinforced what my mum had always drilled into us, that if you don't study hard, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't have an education, first of all, if you don't work hard. And she just reminded me of my mum so much, and pushed me and said to me, don't let them take away what is inside of you, and push for it. And I never forgot that. And I suppose that was when my determination began, because when I left school, I wasn't very optimistic, but going to college and meeting that lady really pushed me. Okay. So when I got to by the time I was in my 30s, to be honest, by the time I got to my 30s, I was already sitting around a board table with directors, and so her words really kind of traveled with me. So so that's followed me throughout my lifetime.
Okay, so that was quite an influential time in terms of your determination to make progress regardless of what was being said.
Definitely.
And then on reflection now, when you look back, you can actually see why you got to where you got to in the end. That journey.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like Derek, my parents both came over from, my father first came from Kingston when in 1960, and then he sent for my mum, and she came in 1961. She came from St. Elizabeth. So they came, and I think from a young age, I definitely saw their determination to work together. And I suppose one of the things that stick out for me most of all was the fact that how they worked together so much that my mother worked as a nurse at night, and my dad worked at Ford's at Dagenham during the day. So they hardly saw each other. Yeah. But what it did, it caused a stability for us. So, yeah.
Okay, Karen, I'm just thinking you might have a question for Angela, based on that she did say she studied in Ealing.
Yeah, I was going to actually ask you, what school did you, what institution did you study at?
I studied at an institution called Metanoia that was based in Ealing Common.
Okay.
Counselling institution.
And you know, coming to Ealing and everything, what was your sort of like experience as opposed to your South London experience, you know? So coming to the rarefied atmosphere of Ealing.
Right. So basically I was born in Balham. I left Balham when I was 16 and moved to West London. So I actually grew up in Harlesden. And as I grew up, going to Ealing always made me think that I was actually going to the upper class area. Seriously, when I was younger. And because I was studying counselling at a time when there were very few Black counsellors, I was always a minority. Yeah, I was probably the youngest of a lot of middle class women and men. Yeah, so not negative. I felt quite privileged, to be fair.
Well, we were happy to have you, and look what you produced. So you know.
Yeah, thanks for that, Karen. So Angela, the same question to you as a child of the Windrush generation. What do you think we should be celebrating in 2023 for the 75th anniversary?
Resilience. I think we need to celebrate resilience because we have been through, if you know, obviously we know that the history goes far beyond, far further than 1948, but certainly for what we've achieved in this country, when I look at myself, when I look at my children and my grandchildren, and I say that, you know, we have been able to do that, and it has been sheer determination and hard work. You know, I say resilience. We have a resilience that maybe the fourth and fifth generations need to know about, and somehow we need to transfer to them that, you know, we learned because of what our parents went through. We saw the struggles, we felt the struggles. I'm fortunate that my children, they understand the struggle. They didn't necessarily have to face it, but they understood it. And they have an identity. And I think that those are the things that we need to celebrate. We need to celebrate resilience. We need to celebrate identity, and we need to celebrate leadership.
Yeah, and that's a great way to put it, because also what you're also talking about is legacy. Without a doubt. So that's great. And the leadership is important because our generation, the children of the Windrush generation, did have access to the mysteries of leadership, management, organizational development, understanding history, understanding the context in a way that our parents and grandparents never did, you know, for historical reasons. So we're almost like a middle generation. Yeah. If you look at in the context. So yeah, thank you for that. Beverly, yes.
No, I just smiled when Angela mentioned resilience. Of course, you know, we have the mental health conference, and that word resilience has been in my mind for a long time.
Hope.
Last, you know, I organized for the association independent service each year, and last year the theme was overcome. Yes. And I've already written the script for this year, and the theme is resilience.
Oh, wow.
So if you hear it out there, I didn't steal it because I've already written my speech and everything. I know it's in August.
Yeah.
And I chose resilience, and I did come up with the resilience.
Yeah. So. And of course, and that's a good point, Beverly, actually, that you mentioned that as we, you know, come through the pandemic era, and we've run those platforms with Birmingham Solihull Mental Health Trust under the theme of hope and resilience. So that is a very powerful word, or words, hope and resilience. And Angela, you will probably remember a couple of years ago when we introduced the
Hope is
first
contagious.
Windrush scandal activities. Hope is contagious.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it was absolutely contagious as people left the Caribbean, young people. And I think I've said on other forums that in this generation, we would never send our children at 16 and 18 years old 4,000 miles somewhere else to start a new life on their
send them
own.
down the road. They won't let them go to the shop.
We hardly would send them down the road. We'd
We'll send them to the corner shop.
Exactly. We wouldn't do that now, let alone that. So there's something of that word resilience and power of that generation, without a doubt. Right. We're going to switch now, and I'm going to bring in Dean Roden from the US. And Dean, I would just like you to introduce the guests that you've asked to come on. And this is a nice surprise for everybody.
Yes. First, I want to thank you, Mr. Page, and all distinguished guests. It's always an honor to come on this platform. Sometimes I said I don't know if I should go in my British accent or my US accent, but I was a former president of the Hermitage Citizen Association in Kingston, Jamaica. And, when I was there was a gentleman, he went to World War II, and he would tell me a lot of stories. And when Rudy mentioned what you guys are doing, we secure a spot in Hermitage. Hermitage, they have a park that it was like from in the 50s. It was either Oak Garden or the Hermitage Park. And I'm very honored that this evening I've seen our PR person, Mr. Maurice Mesa. He had drafted a proposal, a 10-year proposal in beautifying the beautification of the community. He's also a lecturer at the university campus. I've been out to Jamaica like over 12 years. So Maurice is the man that keep me up to date with Hermitage. He's a public relation person. He's presently doing the beautification of the community. I don't know if he's at work or you might get a chance to say something, because in Jamaica, they are 5 hours behind you guys. So most of the people, they are at work. So we have also a relative of that young man, the gentleman that went to World War II. And we're going to be putting a plaque in the park where we're doing just in honor of that. And we're going to also put a plaque for the Windrush. We have secured, but Maurice is the man that have to give me the okay. So for me to see him on this platform, we are really honored to have Mr. Mesa to be here. Mr. Perry also, he's also a businessman, he's an entertainer, he's a singer, and he's working with Hermitage, but he's in Florida. He's a part of the diaspora that is trying to strengthen this program. So once again, there are other members that they're here at the Senate into the Citizen Association group. So members might be coming in and out because of their work and their internet. They say they have internet problems.
Yeah, that's okay. So are we going to hear from the relatives of the gentleman that
Yeah, she said she had internet problems. So there were 2 of them came on. I don't know if they're still on it because I can't see them. One was more,
right.
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. If they come back on. So hopefully we can hear from Maurice then. Maurice, are we going to be able to hear from you?
All right, good evening.
Evening.
Ms. Lindsay, I greatly appreciate that account of the history of Jamaicans in England. As you say, that the whole family put together and pay for the transportation, I can associate with that as it relates to my mother's bigger brother. And I think he left here in the 50s. And it wasn't until it was the early 2000s that my mother actually got to see him and he has now transitioned, but I have never ever heard the story of the old Jamaicans transition in England. Nah, but as it relates to the community of Hermitage, again established in 1951, and it was established primarily in relation after the 51 storm, and it was in relation to providing low income houses, but it wasn't, yes, it was low income houses, but it was really structured. It was structured very decently in the sense that in the center of the community, you would have a daycare center that would facilitate the daycare for kids and as such for those who were working outside of the community, so it would facilitate that. We had the community center, which was built subsequent to that. I think it was built in the 1970s, early 80s, if I am not correct. Dean and Parry can correct me on that. But as it is, the community of Hermitage, from the history over the years, it has always been, though low income, it was always been a working class community where the first set of owners, landowners in the community were basically persons who were self-employed or have gainful employment outside of the community within those opportunities that were available then. Again, as it is, the community transition over the years, and it went through the periods of political activities as it relates to the Jamaican saying is either your labor right or your PNP. So we went through that influence. We survived that influence. And as it is now, we are looking at transforming the community into a university township. And we are modeling that of especially from my experience up in York, because I actually went to the University of York. It was what, '05 to '06. And one of the things that we realize is that the confidence that we step with as Jamaicans, that even the Africans had those confidence, especially when we're in the classes. So I can associate with what Angela is talking about. Because when we walk into a classroom in at York, we step with our chest high. We never know what it was to be submissive or accept racism.
Yeah.
And one of the things with us as Jamaicans, you pointed out as it relates to resilience, is our ability to make a good joke of our reality and not internalize it and see ourselves as victims. We're never ever a victim. Now, as it relates to the community, during the 80s, the 70s, 80s come forward, one of the issues that we had, and it is a positive and it have its downside, was the whole issue of migration, in the sense that many of our leadership moved. They went on to greener pastures as it relates to economic empowerment. But as we can see, especially with Mr. Clement, you realize the man is a real Jamaican, irrespective of what. You don't have to ask. You see it print over him in the entire demeanor. And I can tell you this, that
you'd have to make him an honorary one because he's Grenadian.
Okay. But what you find happening is that when we look at the community and with the migration, one of the things that we have was that at the leadership level, that cadre of leaders that were community oriented and were able to steer the community in a direction they went north, and as such it created a vacuum at the helm where the community leadership is concerned. And we must say thanks to Mr. Roden, as we call him Dean. Thanks to Mr. Roden for taking up that mantle during the early 80s, and if not in the 70s, in carrying the goodwill of those before him and passing it on to the generation below him. And we can state that, whereas Dean pointed out earlier that he was once the president, I think that Dean is being modest there. He's our eternal president for our citizen association. But where the community is concerned, we went through that period where the lack of leadership at the helm create and it pushed the community along the line of misrepresentation at the helm, where persons start to see the community as what you would call it now, as you would call it, a political enclave. It's either your Labour right or your PNP. At one point, it was a Labour right, a PNP thing, then it converted to the Labour Party. All right? And to this day, it remained that way. But over the years, what you find happening is that during the 90s, the 80s come forward, that whole notion of community, of belonging to Hermitage, it is something that started to reinforce with the leadership that we had under the Dean Roden leadership. All right. Then what you find happening over the years again, another cadre of persons during the 1990s who were my cohort, they actually migrated, this time not to England, but to the US, again, creating a leadership vacuum at the helm, and as such, create that opportunity for persons who are not necessarily looking to develop the community along the line that it would be more inhabitable, but more along the line of political affiliation that they took over. But the Citizen Association, as you pointed out earlier, as you say, your grandfather went to school, went to work in the day, and your grandmother went to work at night. But they all had the common goal of developing their kids. That same resilience has played out in the community of Hermitage, where persons like myself, who got the benefit to work under the umbrella of the leadership that is going in the direction of community development, many of us got the chance to move on to higher education at UWI. And whereas before now, due to educational opportunities, you find that the transition from high school to university wasn't as high as it is now, but the direction was there and the objective was there. And so you find that, as you pointed out, Miss Clark, that you were the few among the few that were actually accountants within any job that you are in. The same thing was the reality in the community, where the persons who actually went through the system were far and few. But at the same time, they created an avenue or that example that can show to the community that the whole notion of achieving educational, to reach through the system and achieve a PhD and so on, is now the norm. It is now feasible to, it's now seen as a rite of passage for want of a better word, by the citizens, and that is what we are now having. Now, what we now have in the community since the last 10 years, going on for the next 10 years, is that with the migration and so on, but not only to the foreigners, but also locally, persons who went through the system, got a formal education, start to earn, well, a middle class income, start to move out the community again. That reduce the social capital within the community. However, what we are now doing, my cohort, is now to push, to leverage the benefit of the university, create a university township. So as we can now look at financing the housing stock that is here, and as such push up property values. Where property values are concerned in the community, I am pleased to say that the values are increasing. Since over the last 5 to 10 years, we can safely state that property values have tripled in many cases. The average house now in the community costs about, this would be an average around $6 million around. So that would be roughly 30,000 pounds. Still low, but it is moving from under 5,000 pounds. So you understand where we are coming from. And the direction that we are moving is to establish certain the infrastructure so as to enable that sustained economic growth, not only by employment outside the community, but from the community itself. And so far, we have been successful in achieving that. On the educational front, we have a scholarship program that we are now running in the community where we are now seeing homegrown doctors and lawyers emerging from the community. And I am pleased to say that over the last 5 years, every graduation ceremony, we have at least 3 or 4 graduates from the university who we call homegrown. And as such, and from the cohort of persons who are now going into the high school, I don't know if you guys remember, but what they have is a traditional high school system and the secondary school system, whereas those who go through the traditional high school are more likely to enter into the university system. Now I can say that at least every every for every 2 household, we can say that we have at least two kids who are moving in the direction of going through the formal education system. Whereas persons before used to say that the common entrance, very few from the community would gain access to the traditional high school. And see, Mr. Parigine is one of the original trendsetters as it relates to moving on to the traditional high schools. And that he went to my alma mater, Wolmer's. So where the community is concerned, we are developing it. Now, as you can see the picture behind me that I put up, that is the average gate now within the community as it relates to the upgrading of the infrastructure in the community. The model that we are using is I don't, well, most of you guys wouldn't remember this, but they have what they call the Golden Triangle in Kingston. These are the areas where the diplomats tend to live, and it's really the upscale part of the of the KMA, Kingston Metropolitan Area. And that is the model that we are using to facilitate the development of the community. As it is now, we are moving in that direction and we are achieving it. The transformation is happening where the investment from the government is concerned. We are now benefiting from increased investment in the community, because one of the things that we do have and one of the legacy of the 70s and the 80s is that, don't judge me, but most of us still remain laborites. And however,
right. So,
however,
yeah.
the difference now is that the target is really community development. And we are pleased to say that we have an MP who is on board with us, fully on board with us, and moving in the direction of facilitating the development of the community through significant investment in the social infrastructure within the community.
That's excellent, Morris,
Okay,
because you've given an insight in terms of where people have come from, and that generation who landed in late 50s, in the 60s, as Beverly indicated, they were great organizers because they organized churches, they organized businesses, they organized Saturday schools. So we absolutely understand that generational transition, that journey. So it did continue. And of course, what's good for us now in terms of the kind of relationships we have a program called Homeward Bound. Beverly's significant partner in that, and working with Dean. So next year, the relationships that we've now established with Hermitage through Dean is that Homeward Bound for the Diamond Jubilee. But again, it's those relationships coming back from the diaspora now. And most importantly, there's collaboration across the diaspora between the UK and USA. And it's the same for the other Caribbean islands as well. So in terms of the English-speaking Caribbean and the diaspora, all of those islands, those same sort of people, as you recognized in Derek, that's the same sort of generations of people who came over in the 60s. We, the children and the grandchildren, now called the diaspora, still have a significant interest and have been making a contribution back into the Caribbean. But I think your intervention and the way you describe that link, you're probably the first person to actually do that in the way that you've done it. So really thank you for that. Actually, I'm going to ask Karen. Karen, is there something you'd like to ask Morris in terms of the analysis that he's given there?
Well, in listening to what Morris said, it really sort of like when you were describing the movement and then the vacuum, it shows that the generation of Windrush, when they moved out of the islands and everything like that,
Hello?
they create. Can you hear me?
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, they created space for others to flourish as well as example. And I know within my family's sort of when they came here and everything like that, I know there was always the constant idea that we sent money back. We sent a barrel, and we know, to go and help raise circumstances back there. But and in doing that, there was a level of fulfillment to know that you were helping your community at home as well as in England. So did you feel, Morris, that you experienced any of that sort of like the barrel benefits, as it were, to help your community?
Yes, man. All right. Though there were migrations, those who leave, now that we have Zoom, we have simultaneous communication, instantaneous responses. Those who left were always in connection with the families back home, as Beverly can tell you. And I can say that again, remember now the starting period when they just reached, their ability to earn an income was diminished due to racism and so on. But I can tell you, for example, in Hermitage, it was like, for example, during Christmas, the number of barrels that you will see coming during the Christmas time, it was self-evident that that is the link that was facilitated through migration. And it continues even up till today. At one point, the Irish Spring soap was an indicator of you getting a barrel, because those soap were not available in the supermarket. So you have the different indicators that was shown. Even for the Hermitage Citizen Association right now, we have emerged into, I think we have around 5 chapters. And we can proudly say that we have one on each continent. And what you find happening is that with increased communication technologies being employed, you find that the linkage between home and abroad, it is now facilitatory in the sense that persons can participate in the development process and they can instantaneously do so. How it was done before, it was normally through the telegram or the 2-week steel mill thing. And then, you know, the communication was not at its best. So where the community development is concerned, we are seeing it. Not only that, a couple of your generations, Miss Lindsay, they are now financing the construction, the reconstruction of their home here. And the architect, the engineer, advised them that it would be cheaper to knock down the house completely and build over. And they said, no, that house represent us, it represent my mother, it represent my father, and as such, we are going to save the house. And they are now financing, though all retirees, they are now financing the reconstruction of the building. Not only that, they're building it better. So where that linkage is concerned, it was always there, but the issues that arise over the years was the coordination on the ground here in Jamaica. But we have always have and maintained that link between the community and the diaspora. As there's a saying in Hermitage, once you're born here, you're always a Hermitage man, irrespective of where you are living.
Okay, that's great. So Beverly?
Yeah, I just wanted to just, when Karen mentioned about the barrel, I just want to reiterate that, you know, people coming to Britain went and supporting their people back home went far beyond a barrel. They paid school fees, not only for their children, but their extended families. They build up their district, they build houses and no areas that is completely built by English people. And, you know, so they educated their children, they educated their families' children. So it went far beyond just the barrel. You know, they'll tell you that the money remittance is one of the biggest economy for the Jamaican, they still do. So it wasn't just barrel, you know, they built houses, they educate children, they did a lot of things, you know, help with building nurses' home and support hospitals. So
I agree with what you're saying.
Because beyond just the barrel.
Yes, because I remember when they had the last big storm that hit through the Windward Islands and Grenada was hit and everything. The level of response from the community, it was instantaneous to make sure people could rise again. And also, you know, it was making sure that the schools were safe, the hospitals were safe, you know, and you know, the older people could have some security and safety. So yeah, I totally agree with that. But
and Karen, you make a great point there.
Even further.
Yeah, because there's a great point, because if you look at what's recently happened as it relates to St. Vincent, again, massive response from the diaspora, all of the diaspora, US, UK, obviously, it's a given that the UK does that. So again, there is that link, there is that generational link, which is overlooked a lot of the time, but of course, families, generations, that they just get on with it and probably don't look for outsiders to, to commend them. Right, we're running down time-wise. Dean, did you want to make a quick point? I'm going to then come back to Derek.
I just want to make a quick point. I think Karen is she's having some technical problems. She's a granddaughter. Her father was in World War II. I think she's in. Karen, she could just identify. Karen Johnson, you could identify yourself.
Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, Dean had spoken to me me being here today, but I was not aware of it. To the extent that I was supposed to say something. But yes, as I said to you guys before, my granddaddy fought in the World War II, and he used to tell us, little stories, bits and pieces of things he went through and so forth. But I don't really know much,
okay.
To be frank. But I'm aware of that, and I know him did do more like a mathematics thing, and then he came here where he was working at down by Ligani, the police section over there. So down from Attila's Corner. I don't remember the name of the place.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right, but it's interesting for us. The point being is that connection, that generational connection. That's what we're really talking about. So thanks for that anyway.
Yeah, man. There were two of them. There were two granddaughters. One sorry at Lou, but at least she.
You made it. Thanks for that, Dean. Let me go to Derek now. Derek, so your perspective on much of what Morris was talking about and how that mirrors from a Grenadian perspective. Need to unmute.
You need to make a song about unmute and unmute.
I mean, Morris and Beverly and Angela really unearthed some, real brilliant synopsis. And I think with regards to the us folks from the diaspora, when you think of folks going back to the Caribbean, as Morris alluded to, and literally in many cases changing the entire infrastructure of a village, right? Many parts of Grenada that was, if you like, barren, and people would not even live there. Many Black Londoners went back home. In fact, there's one particular place in Grenada called Hope. It's called Hope City. It's way out in the bushes, and they've managed to create an entire city in Hope and many other parts of Grenada. And with regards to that concept of that link that Morris talks about, I mean, from the time we were little children, and mother talked about going back home. So I went back home to the Caribbean very early. I think it was 1985. Having done very well in the UK, I decided that I'm going to take my skill and go back to the Caribbean. I went back to Grenada and opened a college, a hairdressing school, and 4 salons. So this concept of giving back, therefore, was in our consciousness, based on how our mother schooled us, go back and give back. And that whole going back and giving back began way, way back in the day when she had taught us to send the box. Before the barrel, Morris, you had the box. You send the box home first in those days, and the barrel followed afterwards. But there was something about the barrel, that smell, that fragrance, that British fragrance that children remembered. I remembered as a child getting the box, and you open the box, that wonderful fragrance. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said about our people. And back to the term resilience.
Yeah.
My mother now, I mean, she's 89, going into 90. And I mean, I feel a sense of, I feel proud to know that she came like many other parents came, and they worked hard and they inspired us, and they inspired people back home, and they kept families alive. I mean, and most was single women, single women who kept families wholesome and alive. So I'm really proud of that part of our legacy.
All right, thanks very much for that, Derek. Right, we've come to the end of this wonderful Windrush session, so I'm going to leave the last word with you, Karen.
Okay, thank you. All I can say is this has been a wonderful experience. It's given me some insight and sort of like reckoning with, you know, what my parents, because they don't talk about it, but, you know, they just live through it. And, you know, it gives us me an appreciation, you know, because of, you know, growing up in the 80s, 90s and experiencing the privilege that I had, as opposed to the struggle. And, you know, there was a little bit of struggle, but, you know, but they muted it by the again, we go back to the word resilience. It's always that, and it's not shouted from the mute, it's just done. You know, I truly appreciate Beverly and Morris and Angela and Derek Goins and Dean talking about that experience and how it didn't lower us, it lifted us, you know. And we're hoping that the generations that, you know, that we're growing and raising now can see that and take pride in it. And, you know, thank you very much for all of you who've sort of embodied that idea that we are proud people, we are part of this country, we came here to go and show what we could do and survive and strive, and we want to work with people. We're not in, you know, isolationists, we're inclusive. And that was the benefit of the Windrush. They came to share, they came to help mother country, you know. Well, we've helped it, and we would like that appreciation in as we bring up the rest of our generations that come forward, because we are British, you know. We were British when we were in the West Indies, and we are British now. So thank you very much. I would also like to remind you all that the Ealing Libraries were very proud to go and take part in this session today, and we have online services. Anybody who would like to go and look at the past videos of what we've collaborated with Rudy, and also the book stock in which we're trying to diversify and increase so that people can have more inclusion and acknowledgement and empowerment going forward. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you for that, Karen, and good night all. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good night.